Hey everyone, my name is Luke and welcome to my channel and welcome to part 3 of my new tutorial series aimed at helping beginners to PixInsight get off to a good start in this fantastic but quite complicated program. Today's tutorial is actually going to be all about processing an image in the Hubble palette. So I've got data ready, prepared for you guys. This is my own data. It's from a Redcat 51, a 1600mm and astronomic SHO filters. So pretty standard equipment all in for a monochrome setup, and we're actually going to be processing an image of the Elephant's Trunk Nebula, and it should look something like this when you're finished. To follow along with this tutorial, you're going to need a few things downloaded and installed to your PixInsight. So you will need the Easy Processing Suite by Dark Archon, and you're going to need StarNet 2 at the very least. If you have StarXTerminator, great. If you have NoiseXTerminator, even better. But if you don't have those, you can still follow along with this tutorial just fine. Now, without any further ado whatsoever, let's jump straight into this and we can begin the processing tutorial in earnest. Now, once you've downloaded from the description box down below the data to follow along with this, if you want to use my data, which I would recommend the first time you try this, you're going to be able to unzip that file and notice it contains 4 different files for you. So they've got tutorial, process, icons. If you just drag and drop that onto your PixInsight, you're going to see all these icons appear along one side. Now these are tools, some of them that are already included with PixInsight. I've just made them visible and pinned to the desktop for you. There's also some extra ones created by my good friend Bill Blanchon. Fantastic tools. I think everybody, be they beginner or advanced, should be looking at using these things. So I thought, why not include them and get anybody interested in learning this program used to them right from day one. The other 3 files in the folder are going to be a hydrogen, an oxygen and a sulfur master. So if again, you just drag and drop these into the main window, you should see it loads them all in and we're left with something looking like this. The first thing I'm going to want to do is make this data so I can actually see it. So I'm going to select, in my case, the H file just by clicking the header right there, hit window and tile windows. You'll notice that whichever file you select is the one that's going to remain in the top left. Not that it really matters, but it's just worth noting. And the next thing to do now is, because it's all black and we really can't see anything, we want to take a look at this data and any underlying issues. So I'm going to open up the STF tool by double clicking it. And just one by one, by clicking the image and clicking the screen stretch button, we're going to go ahead and take a little bit of a look. Immediately we can see the hydrogen master doesn't look too bad. It's very free of gradients. The sulfur, again, not too bad. I think there is a bit of a gradient going across that one. And the oxygen is pretty awful. There's an inverse gradient that looks something like, I would say, an overcorrection from flats. Maybe that's what occurred. We took this data an awful long time ago, so I can't really remember. Aside from that, it also looks to be that there's some stacking artifacts. So if I just zoom right in, I guess to the bottom of this sulfur image, you can see a big black bar where it's been registered to the main channel during stacking. So we're going to need to crop all of that out as well before we get going. So the first thing I'm going to do is I am actually going to use this sulfur channel. Double click dynamic crop. It's going to open up this window for you. And just from the corners, with an overview of the entire image visible, you may need to zoom out so you can see the image. You can just zoom in and out on an image just using your mouse scroller. I'm going to take off a decent crop from the entire outside. Don't be shy with this thing. And before we go ahead and apply that, we want to also drag the new instance window across to the hydrogen and across to the oxygen so that everything's going to be cropped to the same dimensions once we hit this tick. Now everything matches. That's perfect. So the next step in processing this data is going to be to start to tackle these gradients. We really want these out of the way before we do any linear fitting or anything like that. So I'm going to try and deal with the worst one of them first, which is going to be this oxygen by far. Now, this is up to you. You can freely experiment with this all you like. You may want to try dynamic background extraction on this and have a go at tuning your settings in with that. It may take a few passes to get that right. I'm going to give it a go with ABE and just see how that turns out. If it turns out wrong, I'll just leave it in the video and show you guys. So I'm going to use a correction, subtraction, that's what I want selected, and discard background model. I don't really need to see the background model for this. We're going to be able to keep assessing the images that are created from this and see if we're getting the effect that we want. So you'll notice when you drop down interpolation and output, this is how you adjust the aggressiveness of gradients that it can deal with, if you like. A lower number in this, right the way down to 1, means it's going to be dealing with less and less intense gradients, and a higher number can deal with more and more complex gradient shapes. For this, if I just show you what it would do at defaults, just for the sake of it real quick, drag and drop it over there and SDF that new window, we can see it's done a reasonable job, but not that great overall, because we've got overcorrections again the opposite way now, so the corners are darker, whereas before they were even lighter. So I'm going to try first with a weak way of tackling gradients, so just a function degree of 1. Let's take a look at that. It's made it less aggressive. Now I'm going to try with a slightly higher function degree. In this case, I'm skipping past 2 and going right to 3 to see how this looks. Again, that's notably, if you can see my screen, that's notably a step better than just a function degree of 1. Let's go ahead now over to 5. I'm applying this again to the resultant image. So we've gone 1, 3 and 5 currently. That's looking better again. We are verging on the chance of overcorrections here, but I'm going to go with it, just see how it occurs. So I'm going to go right up to a function degree of 7 and see how this turns out. Stretch this, and I'm pretty happy with that. That looks quite nice. So if I just, for the sake of this now, if I just close down the other ones and I'll leave the function degree of 1, 3, 5 and 7, this version here where it said 4 passes of ABE, open, and we instead go ahead and just try function degree of 7 right away on that base image, and we'll take a look at how it looks. You can see the effect is not as good. So I'll just go ahead and close automatic background extraction because we're done with that on this particular image. If I just show you this now side by side with the one where we went 1, 3, 5 and 7 on the left and just straight to 7 on the right, you can see we've got like an undercorrection in the bottom left, an overcorrection in the bottom right, and it's overall just not as flat. So by all means, don't be shy about stacking these up and trying to get rid of gradients in multiple steps. There's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't do any harm. I do it all the time and I think I make pretty nice images. So it can't be doing too much damage. Go ahead now and close the original oxygen file. We don't really need that right now because we're going to be going ahead with this one. And now it's finished, I want to give it a bit of a simpler identifier. So I'm going to right click the image, go to identifier and just call it O for oxygen. Let's try and tackle this kind of weak gradient now in the sulfur. Once again, I'm going to give that a go in ABE, so subtraction, discard the background model, and I want a function degree of 1. I'm just going to give it a go, see how this turns out. Looks pretty good. I would say I'm happy at that. I will leave that alone. Go ahead and close that one down, and we'll rename this to S. Again, simplify that identifier. And for the H one here, it's not got much of a gradient at all, but I think it's still worth giving it a little bit of a try just for the sake of it on this tutorial. Let's take a look. And yeah, it's made it a little bit better. It's nothing dramatic on this, so I will go ahead and use it anyway. Close the original file, so all that we're left with is the 3 files that we actually just created using automatic background extractor. So we've got a H, an S and an O, and you can go ahead if you want and tile these windows once again just to get the data into a bit of a neater layout on your screen. So the next part of processing on this is going to be to pass these through linear fit. Now, unlike when processing an LRGB image where you tend to want to use the strongest channel I've found, so that'd usually be luminance to linear fit to, when processing SHO images, I like to fit to the sulfur channel. Otherwise, you often find that this hydrogen is going to get really out of hand. It'll be out of hand anyway, you'll see. But it'll be easier to tame if we linear fit everything to the S. So, to do that, we're going to open up linear fit, just on this right hand side. Point it to a reference image, that is S in this case. By all means, experiment. Have a look at the different outcomes with your own data or with this. and just drag and drop the new instance window onto the oxygen and the hydrogen. You will need to perform another STF on these to have a little bit of a look at what it is you've done to the data, but this should be done in just a moment. And there we are. So you can see it looks washed out, but when we hit STF, looks great again, and I'm happy to proceed at that. Now, this is where there'll be a slight fork in the tutorial based on if you have NoiseXTerminator or Topaz or anything like that, versus just using Easy Processing Suite's Easy Denoise tool. That's what you want to use at this point now. So before we go from being linear into the non-linear phase of processing, we want to pass it through noise reduction. So this tool, Easy Denoise, is designed to work with linear data, so that's why we want to use it right now. So ideally, you'd pass this through the hydrogen, the oxygen, and the sulfur, but if you don't have the time for that, just pass it over the hydrogen, as we're going to use that as a kind of a luminance frame for the recombined image in just a moment. So it's just going to be simply a case of make sure TGV denoise settings run TGV denoise is selected, otherwise it won't work, and then hit run Easy Denoise, and then quite probably go grab yourself a drink or something, because it takes a while to run. Now, I don't use that right now anymore. I instead use NoiseXTerminator or Topaz myself, so I'm going to skip that step and move right on to the next phase of processing, which is going to be to take this data from linear to non-linear. So to do that, I'm going to use Script, Easy Processing, and Easy Soft Stretch. Each of these channels, one at a time. So hydrogen, I've now selected the oxygen. Can use that same process, Easy Processing, Easy Soft Stretch, and run. And once more, just on the sulfur, as you can see, this doesn't take very long at all, even when I'm taking my time and moving the mouse pointer a little bit slower to show you guys everything. Everything's now in the non-linear phase, so we can go ahead and start to get ourselves ready for a recombination. Now, to do that, I'm going to use LRGB combination tool. Even though this isn't LRGB data at all, you could try a simple SHO combination without L selected, but I find you get better results using your strongest channel effectively as a luminance file. So to that end, as we can see, the strongest one here is the hydrogen, so I'm going to go H, S, H, and O, because we're doing an SHO palette. That's the Hubble palette. Don't be afraid to apply chrominance noise reduction to this kind of image where there isn't any fine detail that potentially could get misrecognized as chrominance noise and nuked. And then just go ahead and hit apply global and wait a few moments for it to do its business. Alright, so as you can see now, LRGB combination is finished. We can go ahead and close that down. We can actually go ahead and minimize or indeed close the rest of the other channels. I'll just move them off to one side to remove some visual clutter. And I'm going to work with this right in the middle of the screen so I can show you guys what's going on. Now, immediately we have some more problems to deal with. So if I just zoom this up just a touch, you can see the background is biased towards magenta, purple kind of color, and the foreground is very much dominated by that hydrogen channel that we put in the green. I'm going to deal with both of these just in order. So first of all, I'm going to use another script. So script, utilities, correct magenta stars. Just execute this as it is, all default settings, and wait a moment. As you can see, the background's now changed to a much more nice neutral grey colour, but we're still left with that strong overpowering green. So to use SCNR and get rid of that, we'll just open it up. You can see all the defaults. I'm not doing anything dramatically complex for this, anything but in fact. Just dragged and dropped across, and as you can see, we're now in a decently colour calibrated state. So before I go any further on processing this, I actually want to amp up the colours just a little bit so we can see what we're working with. So I've opened up curves, again just over on the right hand side right here. I've clicked saturation, that's part of the curves tool, and I'm now going to open a real-time preview. And just by dragging the middle of that saturation kind of slider, the curve itself, I'm just going to drag it up a little bit right from the mid. And if you can see, if I just go and show you the before and after of that a couple of times, hopefully even through YouTube compression, this comes through for you guys. You can see I'm injecting a little bit of color into everything. That includes the background, the foreground, the stars, everything. That's what we want right now for this. But you don't want to go too far. If I just demonstrate what that would look like this, it's going to start to look ridiculous and be really hard to deal with. We've done what we needed to do. That's fantastic. Now we can close curves for a moment, reset the tool. At this point, I actually want to take the stars out of this image before proceeding any further with further processing, because the stars are really nice and well controlled at the moment. I'd like to keep them something like this. Whereas if I start aggressively adjusting curves now, we're going to get stars blowing out and weird halos appearing, and we want none of that. So this is where StarNet for you guys is going to come in, or StarXTerminator if you own it. So you're going to open up your tool and generate a star image. I think on StarNet 2 this is called Generate Star Mask, I think is the equivalent setting. Just quite simply, everything at defaults, drag it across, drop it on your image, and wait a few moments for it to finish. Okay, so it's a few moments later, and when it's finished you should be left with two files on your screen, something like this. So the one with just the stars in it, I'm going to give it a new identifier, just call it what it is, it's stars. And starless image, we'll just call it starless, why not? At this point you can go ahead and close down StarXTerminator, StarNet, whichever you used. Just go ahead and minimize your stars image, you don't need that for now, just put that to one side. And we can start work in earnest on this main kind of body of the image. So the first thing I'm going to want to do is open up curves once again without any masks just yet. Open up a new real-time preview, click on the RGBK part of the curves transformation window, and I'm going to perform kind of an S curve to this. So I'm going to raise the kind of mids and highs and just drop the shadows down ever so slightly like this. So you can see the effect that's having. If I just go back and forth a few times, it's almost like adding another dimension to this image. It gets far more dynamic and looks a lot better, I think. So I'm going to apply that once. It could probably take this second one actually, but I will just reset and go again and make sure it's a nice gentle adjustment. You don't want to overdo this and end up with something that looks like that, because, you know, who wants to see that on their images? So just gently control what you're doing. Look at what you're doing. Ideally, you don't want to be looking at the curves window. Instead, just take a hold of it and with the kind of left mouse button held down, look at the actual image window so you can see what it is that you're doing. And to me, that looks pretty good. As you can see, that's turned out all right. I'm going to go ahead and apply that. Reset curves once again. And I think just a tiny touch more saturation applied. We don't want to be sending the background purple or anything like that, but just a tiny little bit. We're not actually done with saturation at this point. We just want to saturate the image just enough so that color masks are going to work. Now these are all included for you guys already. I'll reset curves right there. As you can see across to one side, these are Bill's color masking tools: red, yellow, green, cyan, blue and magenta. For this, I think the first part of the color I want to deal with is going to be this kind of yellowy goldy stuff. So I'm going to use a yellow mask. Just drag and drop it across. There we have a yellow mask right away. Now before I'd make any adjustments to the data, I want to target some of this blue too. So I want a blue mask. Just drag and drop that and hopefully this will turn out okay. That's not been ideal at this point, so I won't tackle the blue just yet. I'm going to go back on my word there real quick, and we'll first of all make a clone. Take this clone, open up curves once again. This time the color that we want to actually mask, I'm going to boost it beforehand using this as a sacrificial clone. This is actually a decent technique and I use it a fair bit. So I'm going to open that preview window once again. I'm going to boost the blues and crush the blacks from it as well. You can see there's no more black, there's no more blue appearing in that background that should be black. Instead, we've just got a strong blue coming through right there. It looks awful, but it is strengthening that blue, which we actually want to mask. So I'll do that, and I'm going to try now a blue mask on this sacrificial clone that I created. That's much more like it. As you can see, we've not got that background coming into the mask anymore that we didn't want. So I can go ahead and close this one that we just freshly created. Put that to one side. I want to work on this yellow first, but before we do that, you can see we've got another tool over here called Mask Blur. So I'm just going to drag and drop this across to each of these images just a couple times so they're not looking quite so speckled in their appearance, which would show through quite strongly on your finished image once you've done with saturation and color adjustments. Now I'm happy at that. I'm going to drag the yellow mask right beneath the identifier for the starless image. Make sure I've got the starless image selected. It should look something like this. Curves, once again, as you can see, I really like curves. I'll make sure the tool's reset and we've got a preview window open. And we can start now to work on this kind of yellow goldy section of the image. So I'm going to try adding some red first. This is one of those things where you're going to have to experiment and figure out what looks good for you. So I like the appearance of that red going in there, but I'm not done with it. I'm going to actually, before I apply that, click the green. Now I'm going to add some green highlight. That'll make the brighter parts go back towards yellow, which is going to make this image a bit more dynamic. But while it's doing that, it's also making the back, the darker colors effectively in the image go towards yellow too, and we don't want that. So if we add another pip to the green right here and just drag that down, you can see all of these colors are going to start to go back towards the reds that we just biased in there. So again, just look at the actual image rather than the curves window until you're happy. So that looks far improved to my eye. I would say that's a much more interesting image at that point. That looks good. It could take that second step, so I am going to give it. And before I'm done with the tool, I'll just reset it once more and add one more step of increased green midtone and decreased low light effectively. So just something like that, a really gentle curve. You can see that's having a subtle effect, especially around the base of the trunk right there, but it's worth doing. Looks decent. We'll attack this again with just another mask in a moment. So we can go ahead and get rid of that yellow mask. It's no longer kind of valid. We've changed the image too much. We can't use that anymore. But I'm going to have a go now with this blue mask. So I'll drag that across just like we did for the other one. Make sure you've got your main image selected. Open up curves once again, and I want to boost the blues. So I've selected the blue part of the curves. Bring it up ever so slightly. Add some green to that same region too. If you go too far, it's going to bias it kind of to a cyan color, but just enough, and you should start to see it become like that true oxygen 3 teal, starting to come through and looking really quite cool on this image. I'd say maybe just one step of that, or a slightly weaker second step, rather than doing it all in one. Again, don't be shy about taking some time with this. I'm just rushing through for the sake of a tutorial and not boring people half to death as you sit through watching me do this. I just want to give you the concepts and the ideas behind it. So I'm going to close that mask now. Again, we've changed the image too much. It's no longer kind of relevant anymore. I'm going to try again with another yellow mask at this point. See if we can bring some more dynamic kind of appearance to this image. A few passes of mask blur. As you can see, we've blurred that out nicely. Drag and drop that just below. Once again with curves, I'm going to use green for this. So just a little boost to those green midtones. You can see the effect that that's having. If I went too far, it'd look awful. And again, the opposite way, and we'll skew everything out. But right from defaults again, just a little boost and a tiny bias downwards. And I think that's looking pretty attractive. Almost there really on this. Go ahead and apply that. Reset everything again. Remove that mask, and that's looking pretty good. We can go ahead and add the stars back into this at this point. I think one thing I guess we could do beforehand though, you can see there's lots of these I don't know, I guess kind of sooty, dusty black regions that are really high contrast as it is, but I want to make them even more so, and it's a perfect opportunity to introduce another tool to you that you may or may not want to use, but it's important you know about it. So script, utilities, and dark structure enhance. You can adjust this if you need to, but just for the sake of this, all defaults, and the effect you should see is it's going to make those kind of leap out from the screen, almost like you've again made it look an extra dimension deep, this thing. And if I just go back and forth a couple of times, you can see the effect that that's had, especially around the trunk there. It's looking quite cool. So I'm going to go ahead and put the stars back into this image now. So I'm going to go Process, Pixel Math, open it up, open up Destination and click Create a New Image. Otherwise it will replace whichever image you have selected. And I'm just going to go Starless plus Stars and hit Apply. As you can see, we're now left with an image with the stars back in it. It's quite noisy. I'm going to deal with that on my end because, as I said, I've got NoiseXTerminator to actually take care of that. But before I do, I'm going to demonstrate to you one more tool. So as you can see, we've already got a starless copy that's exactly the same as this. You could just rename this with the capital S if you want, but Bill's got a tool for that, clone for starless. So I'll go ahead and close the previous image. And we're going to use this one now called capital S Starless, and just drag across these star reduction methods 1, 2 and 3 over to the main image, which I'll make a little bit bigger for you guys so you can see the effect this is having, hopefully. So method 1, let's take a look at the result of that. Pretty darn good. I do like that. So we'll undo that, try method 2. Always worth taking a look at all of these. That's also very nice. I didn't like it as much perhaps as method 1. We'll try method 3. See how this one appears. Takes a little bit longer to apply, and yeah, that's a more subtle effect. I do quite like that, but I think for the sake of this one, this is really all about the nebula, not so much about the stars. I'm going to go with method 1 on this and push those stars well into the background. So before I'm done with this, you could actually, at this point, if yours is getting nice and noisy, again, you can actually run it through Easy Denoise. Even though it's designed for linear data, it will still work on this data in its non-linear form. But as I've got NoiseXTerminator, I'm just going to pass it through that real quick, and we'll zoom in, particularly let's say over here, and we'll just take a look at the end result. Alright, as you can see, it's done a wonderful job denoising this image, and we're left with something really quite nice. And hopefully that's good enough to show you guys just about how you can process SHO data. It's well worth delving in and giving it a go yourselves, see what you come up with. Have a few goes at it. You'll probably find you get better and better the more that you do it. Just like anything, practice makes perfect, and that's why I still need lots more practice. But anyway, I hope this has been useful to some of you guys out there, and I'd just like to say, as always, thank you to every single one of you out there for watching. Huge thanks especially to all my channel members, Patreon supporters. You guys absolutely rock, so thank you so much indeed for all that you do. With that anyway, guys, I think that's about the end of this tutorial. I'm going to go ahead and get back to normal duties for a little while I think about what to maybe create for part 4 of this tutorial series, and until then, I look forward to speaking with you, and look after yourselves and clear skies.